We had 8 people working for us. When I arrived, there were 30. And I remember walking into the room and looking around this big long table, and there were 30 young kids with pizzazz and, I assumed, inspiration. They all wanted to work at GOPAC. And I said, we can't afford you. And I said, I'm the new chairman. I want you to look to the left and right because you won't be here in 1 week. So I want each of you to come and tell me why you think you can help me make this organization successful and how hard you're willing to work. And at the end of the week, that many are going to be gone. And so I did. I interviewed every one of them. One left immediately because she knew she didn't want to work that hard. But everybody else came, and I kept 8 people out of 30. And I told Newt, we just cut the payroll. And then I said, now we have to raise the money. And those kids were so fabulous. And I got to work every morning at 8, and I was always the last one to leave. And they got a message of somebody who was committed.
Welcome to the Going Big podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Gentry, and this is the place where we celebrate bold moves and big ideas. Each week, I sit down with inspiring leaders, entrepreneurs, and change makers who are making a significant impact in their careers and in their communities. Whether you're looking to level up your leadership, pursue your passion, or just get inspired to take your next big leap, this is where those stories come to life. Now, if you're listening on iTunes, YouTube, or anywhere else you tune into podcasts, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss an episode. Now, let's dive in to what it means to truly go big. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Going Big podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Gentry, and today's guest is quite extraordinary, as you're about to see. Gay Hart Gaines' longtime professional life spans multiple decades in leadership in public affairs and American civic life. William F. Buckley chose her as the first chairman of the National Review Institute. She was the chairman and CEO of GOPAC, where she partnered with Newt Gingrich to lead a conservative Republican revolution in the United States. And I think perhaps most consequentially, she served as the regent for the Mount Vernon Ladies Association, where she led an unprecedented $100 million plus expansion and revival of George Washington's cherished home. But as you're about to see, there's just so much and so many wonderful lessons to learn here today. And I'm going to learn a lot too. Gay, it's such a privilege and honor to be with you. Thank you and by the way, thank you for hosting us here at your home. This is a real treat.
Thank you, Kevin, for coming. I'm excited about it. And I love the work you're doing.
Well, I have long admired the work you do because in my judgment, your leadership is really quite unprecedented in terms of the influence and effectiveness you've had in both public affairs in the United States and in philanthropy. But for people watching and listening today, they don't have the same benefit that I've had over the years. So let's just start off with, who is Gay Gaines? For those who've never met you, where were you born? Where'd you grow up? And we're going to get into a lot of stories, but who is Gay Gaines? Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, I'm a lucky girl, number one. But I was born in Toronto, and I was an only child. And my father and mother really spent a lot of time with me, especially my mother, who was a great reader and taught me the classics, and she was a teacher, and she really worked with me as a young child. When I was 10, we went from Toronto all the way across Canada on the train, Canadian Pacific, got on the Orangi, which was a ship headed to Australia. We went to Hawaii, to Fiji, to New Zealand, and landed at 6 in the morning, going under the bridge in Sydney Harbor, and I was 10 years old, and my father had been made managing director of Colgate-Palmolive for Australia.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we were there for 3 fabulous years. I mean, it was really an extraordinary experience for a little girl. And it's interesting, just recently, Bondi Beach has been on the news. I went to Bondi Beach every Sunday, and all my classmates did, and we all learned to surf. It was a big part of our lives. And I had a great experience there. And then my father was made managing director of 12 countries in Europe. So we flew back to the United States for a short vacation, and then off from Idlewild to Paris, where we lived in a beautiful house next door to the American Cathedral at Van Dyck Avenue, George Sank, and we were there for 3 years, and it was remarkable.
Well, in my judgment, you're living all around the world, from Bombay to Paris, all these different places.
But I don't remember Bombay. I was a baby there. I left when I was 2.
Well, but it gives you a global perspective that you bring to your work. I think that is an element of your impact, which we'll get into. But I know you went to college in the United States, Sweetbriar College. You met your husband Stanley, who was at the University of Virginia.
That's right.
But as I know you in many ways, if somebody said, what's the one word that defines Gay Heart Gaines, I would say you're a patriot. You really love this country. You were born in Toronto, Canada, but you love it and you show it in so many ways. And again, we're going to get into a lot of these stories, but what is it about America that you love so much that you've dedicated so much of your life to?
You know, Kevin, I went to Kent Place School in Summit, New Jersey. And I had an American history teacher, Miss Sampson. She was skinny, and she would jump up onto the desk and cross her long legs and lean into the class and talk about George Washington. That teacher changed my life. I sort of fell in love with the guy. I just thought everything I get so excited. She would talk about the redcoats were in Manhattan and they were about to come on the island and he was stuck there and couldn't get off. And just the way she painted the pictures, and you were always pulling for George. And then they snuck off in the night, got off. When all the redcoats came, Washington's army was gone, and I loved it. So I give her the full credit. I just became a real patriot, and then I ended up spending a lot of time studying American history.
Well, I'm glad you shared that, because I want to get into the power and importance of mentors and mentorship, which I know you've been a very important mentor to many, another element of your strength and success. But I hear so often that it sometimes was a teacher or someone who either intervened in a young person's life or just was such of a dramatic influence that it really made such a big difference. Well, all right, let's dig into this.
Teachers have that opportunity if they're great teachers and take it. So it's a wonderful profession.
Well, and I know you've done a lot about historic preservation and about American history, so I want to get into that. Okay, so heroes. You mentioned George Washington, and we're going to talk a lot about your heroes. What is it about people who have grabbed your attention? What are their attributes or elements of their character, or anything that, whether it's George Washington, I want to get into what you saw in Newt Gingrich, what you saw in William F. Buckley, what you saw in Rush Limbaugh. What is it? How do you see these things in people that others might see, but you see more deeply?
Well, I'm old, but I didn't know George.
True, okay.
But, you know, I'm attracted, and always have been from the time I was very young, I'm attracted to people who are successful. When I was on the ship going to Hawaii and I was 10, I fell in love with Yehudi Menuhin. He happened to be on the boat. He played the piano, the violin every night. And I was seasick the first day, and he invited me to come sleep he was in the big royal suite, and he invited me to come sleep in his bed and try to get over my seasickness, Yehudi Menuhin. So I've always been attracted to successful people. I like to know what makes them tick and why are they so successful.
See, this is why I knew you would be perfect. I knew you are perfect for the Going Big podcast. This is all about the theme of how it attracts people to what are these attributes and how can people be motivated to lead a life in a big, big way. All right.
Well, Bill Buckley was one of my big heroes.
Well, let's start with Bill Buckley. All right, who was Bill Buckley? Because for people listening, they may have seen Crossfire or some recordings of Crossfire, but he was an extraordinary figure, not only through his personal means of communication, but his leadership. Who was Bill Buckley?
He was a brilliant man, absolutely, and a brilliant communicator. He was a great writer, and he had a wicked sense of humor. He has a lot of fun. It was Bill Buckley on a National Review Institute trip, which I organized because we had the National Review, and I said, let's have an institute. It was a rainy morning in our house in Palm Beach. Nobody could play golf or tennis. And I said, we need to get the word and the message of National Review out to a bigger audience. So let's start an institute. And he said he'd be the chairman in the beginning. Anyway, so now we
You hosted that here in Palm Beach?
In Palm Beach.
The gathering, the initial gathering of National Review Institute.
Yes.
Okay.
And I wasn't planned for that. It was planned to have a gathering of people I loved at National Review just to have a weekend of golf and tennis. And it just poured all weekend long. So we went into the sunroom, and I said, let's see what else National Review can do. Because not many people are reading it, Bill. And he didn't like that, but it was the truth. Mm-hmm. There was a loyal group of people that read National Review, but it wasn't a wide audience. I said, if we do an institute and we invite people to speak and come, and we should do it in Europe, and we should do it in America. And I said, and the thing to do is to get Margaret Thatcher to chair it in Europe, and to get somebody like Rush Limbaugh to chair it in America. And we did that.
And they both, I never knew this aspect of the history.
Yeah. And Margaret Thatcher,
wow.
I'll never forget, she was always the first man down. You know, we would have breakfast.
Explain that for the benefit of people listening, because that's not immediately intuitive. Keep going.
I used to stay up late with her because I wanted to hang on every word she said. And finally she'd look around and all the men had left to go to bed because it was after midnight. And she said, Gay, I think we're the last men standing. And she had a great sense of humor.
Yeah.
People didn't realize that.
You all were very close friends.
Very, very close friends. In fact...
Tell us about that.
Well,
how did that happen?
It happened on these trips as we got to know each other on every trip. I always tried to be the first person down so I could sit with her at breakfast, and the last person at night with her so I could walk her up to her, and then she'd ask me for a brandy in her suite. And it was, I did it on purpose. I wanted to know this extraordinary woman. I admired her so much. I loved her. And she knew that. And she said to me once, I never had many women friends because I was always in politics. And there were just mostly men when I started.
Right. There's those famous pictures,
now.
by the way, those photographs from her cabinet, or whatever you would call the whole, government. She would be the only woman in it. That time, she was such a trailblazer.
And she was so young. She was 23 when she first started. And she did have Dennis, who supported her mammothly. But she was always with men. So I think two things. I think she trusted me, and she could, because I never discussed anything about what we talked about with anybody ever. And she also liked me just because I loved her. When somebody loves you dearly, you do learn to like them, and she ended up loving me. But what a fabulous
who was
take charge woman.
What can you share about her character, leadership attributes that might be valuable insights for anyone listening to say,
Well, particularly for women, she never let the fact that she was a woman stop her from trying anything. I also think she was very smart, and she had a lot of self-confidence. So I think a woman striding into a room filled with very influential, smart men, a lot of men didn't like her because of that.
We're talking about conservatives in Britain in the 70s and 80s.
Yes.
I mean, that's extraordinary.
It is. But she had such self-confidence, and she believed in what she believed. She wasn't just mouthing the words. That's key, Kevin. The politicians today, the ones that I admire and gravitate toward, they have a deep conviction. They mean it. There's a lot that don't. And you can see through that. Mm-hmm. You can see through that.
Well, I know that you're a big fan of Ron and Casey DeSantis. We'll get into that as well. You see something there. But let's talk a little bit about Newt Gingrich. Because, I interviewed Newt. In fact, I think with your help, I interviewed him a few episodes ago. And what he did in terms of the vision he had from first being elected in the 1970s to say, we're not going to accept the status quo anymore. The Republicans accepted being in the minority.
Always.
We're going to do something much bigger and better. And he had that vision and a strategy and a plan. You were key. You were a partner with him. I mean, GOPAC was extraordinary. It was invaluable, indispensable.
Well, he thought of it. He came up with the idea of GOPAC. And he said to me, if you will come to Washington and run GOPAC, we're going to teach and train candidates to run for office. Not just big office, but at every level.
Yes.
And he said, Gay, the key is, I think, that they're all talking off the same page. So Newt taught them what to say, basically.
Oh, he had those cassette tapes.
Yes. He had cassette tapes that the congressman-to-be would put in his car, and all the way to his next speech he was listening. So that they were saying the same thing in Colorado or New Jersey or Michigan, wherever, Texas. And they did that year. It worked. Everybody was united, and that's how Newt got to be Speaker.
All right, so 2 questions about that. First, what did you see in Newt that attracted you to take that role? I mean, you're offered many different roles and ways to get engaged in different efforts. Why did you choose to do that?
Well, I'd run the National Review Institute,
right,
and that was a big success. And I always loved Newt. I didn't know him. I didn't know him well at all.
Really?
But I liked what I saw. And I just asked Stanley, do you think it's okay with you if I go to Washington for a few years? Because we might change the whole country. And I think Newt's the guy that can do it. I thought he was a brilliant guy, and he is. And he makes mistakes like we all do. I do too. But he had the energy and the passion, and I just wanted to get his message out.
Well, what was your role at GOPAC? Because I know you have your sort of that famous black book. You are a fundraiser extraordinaire. Were you making connections? Were you helping him build? Was it outreach? What were you doing that helped bring that form such an effective partnership?
You can't win in politics. You can't win an election without money. And I am a good fundraiser.
You're more than a good fundraiser.
But the key is to ask wealthy people. There's no point in going to people that aren't if you need to really raise a lot of money. But at GOPAC, we had, the most important thing was the message, Newt's message. And we were the ones getting it out to all the people running for office. And then I would get it out to my friends whom I knew who had the money to support GOPAC. And they gave millions.
Did you think Yule would win in 1994?
I always thought we would.
Did you, I mean, because I remember Haley Barbour being at a meeting of the Republican National Committee in July and him saying, you know, I really think we might win.
That's how he thought. We might win.
Exactly.
And I said, Haley, we are going to win.
When did you think you were going to win and why?
When I could get Newt to get on I would get people to loan us their planes. And I flew Newt to Kentucky, and we landed in an airport. He was in a hangar one time. And thousands of people in Kentucky came to hear Newt. And the next place we went was up to Detroit. Same thing. And I said, Newt, you're going to win this. You're going to win this because when people listen to what you can do, what a good leader can do for the country, they believe in you, and you're going to have an opportunity to prove it. And that's when I knew. Mm-hmm. And I was always the first person there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I was the last to leave. All
right, we're going to try to summarize these keys to Gay Gain's success at the end of this as we close out. But let's talk about, okay, you had this extraordinary relationship, this friendship, this partnership with Bill Buckley, with Newt Gingrich, with Baroness Lady Margaret Thatcher, the former Prime Minister of Great Britain during the most important period of the 20th century. I would argue.
I was very lucky.
Tell us about Rush Limbaugh.
Oh. First of all, I adored him, and that's okay for me to say that because I really did. Rush was a very shy man. Mm. And one time when I talked to him...
It's very different than the image that you have
when he
from
was
behind
on
the
EIB, he was bombastic, and he was king of the world. The minute he left his studio, he would come over almost every day after the show and sit down and have a cigar with Stanley on our loggia outside.
Here in Palm Beach?
Here in Palm Beach.
Wow.
Because our house was 2 away from his. We were 2 south of it. He would stop and have a cigar with Stanley.
Wow.
And they would talk and talk. But he told me, Gay, I grew up and I was fat. I never had a girlfriend. Nobody ever liked me much. But he started a radio show when he was a kid, and his parents didn't want him to do that. His father certainly didn't want him to do that. He wanted him to be a lawyer.
Right. He had that
and
whole
he
family
said,
of
I'm not
lawyers.
going to law school, Dad. I want to be on radio. Anyway, he ended up being a phenomenal communicator. But he didn't, when he got behind the Abbey mic, he was fat. And when he left the studio and drove over to our house, he was a different person. Very shy.
Well, what made him special in your eyes?
Oh, his honesty, his conviction of what's the right thing to do, always. I mean, he really gave good advice to people. And he never elaborated. It was just all from the heart. Mm-hmm. That's why his show was so successful. I think people really got it. I adored that man.
Well, he was so key also to what happened in 1994. He's such an extraordinarily effective communicator.
Wouldn't have happened without Rush.
Well, you have an eye for communicators, obviously, because from Buckley to Thatcher to Rush to Newt.
Wasn't I lucky?
Oh, well, it's more than luck. We'll get into that more. By the way, I interviewed Eric Woods Erickson. Eric Erickson is a phenomenally successful radio talk show host based in Atlanta, a great guy, and he told me when I interviewed him about how Rush was so kind to him about just offering him advice, being open, just reaching out to him, and I don't think people know that about Rush or know that about people like that who end up doing those kinds of things.
Rush was a gentle giant. He really was. And when he wasn't behind the mic, he was shy. Rush would never walk into a room like Margaret Thatcher and sort of take charge. He would walk into a room and wait for people to come to him. He never, ever was bombastic. He was very shy. And he also wasn't very good with women. And he didn't have great wives. And he knew it. He knew because they weren't good to him.
Yeah, right. Wow. Yeah. All right. Another aspect of your life is Mount Vernon. And again, I think that obviously what you did for the country, what you did in many ways, incredibly consequential.
Thank you.
But Mount Vernon is a special place because George Washington is exceptional. I mean, it's amazing that he was first in war, first in peace, first in the hearts of his countrymen. The first guy was so good, so extraordinary. Yeah. The Mount Vernon Ladies Association owns Mount Vernon. It's the only privately held presidential home in the United States. You were the first regent, the main leader of it, at a time when you all had a vision to do something special. It kind of, in my judgment, it kind of gotten flat. It was a home.
But Kevin, I wasn't the first regent. I was the first regent to raise a lot of money.
Right. I mean, there were
many regents.
No, you're right. Yeah. The title is regent. I'm sorry, I thought it was first regent. No, exactly.
I was invited to be a vice regent.
Yes. Okay.
And then
gotcha.
It was the board that elected me to be regent.
But still, you saw something because, in my judgment, Mount Vernon was kind of getting kind of stale and flat. Yeah.
Seedy.
And it was just a home to look at, which is spectacular. But school kids, what's the attraction? And what it is that today, and I had Doug Bradburn on earlier this year to talk about that, the educational center, the interactive and immersive experiences. You all had a vision to do something quite dramatic. Walk us through a little bit about that, because that, among your many efforts in leadership and philanthropy, to me, is not only one of the most consequential, but it's one that people should study.
Thank you. I agree. I want everybody to go to Mount Vernon.
They should.
I want every mother and father to take
at Christmas time and the summer and the spring and the fall. It's a spectacular place, and not to mention
I was
the history.
Very lucky. I was elected to the board, and they have one vice regent from a state.
Got it.
So I don't know. Right now, I think there's about 23, but there've never been all the states at the same time.
So you were the vice regent from Florida?
For Florida.
Okay.
I was elected for Florida. And I remember, because I am a fundraiser, talking to the other women. They don't like to ask for money, and they certainly didn't want to ask their friends, and they didn't want to ask their relatives. And I said, well, then who do you ask? You go to total strangers, they're not going to give to you. And so we had a little bit of a contretemps, and I couldn't get them to understand that it was a privilege.
Exactly.
It's a privilege.
Okay, elaborate on that, please. I think that is a fundamental point about fundraising. But most people see it as like hitting somebody up, twisting their arm, as if it's a confrontation. They don't want to do it. You're inviting somebody into a partnership to achieve something big.
I talked to Dick Scaife when he was living in Palm Beach.
Dick Scaife from Pittsburgh, Richard Scaife.
Yeah. And I invited him to come with me to Mount Vernon. And when he saw really what it was, that's why he gave us a big donation. And then from that time on, when I would invite people to come, they got it. And I said to the board, we need an education center, but what we really need is a library. Every other president has a library. And they said, well, no, but we have to raise so much money. And I said, of course we will, but we've got, George Washington deserves a library. So the board finally agreed. It took a bit of persuading.
Wow, that's a spectacular library. You enlisted people like Rich DeVos, another friend of yours, Rich DeVos, extraordinary person.
He was the first person to give me $20 million for the library.
Wow.
Rich DeVos and Helen.
Wow.
And I just said, this president deserves it more than any president. And they were so happy they did once we did it. But it's hard raising money. You have to ask.
It is,
and you
but
have to persuade people that
you're
it's
doing important
valid
things.
and important. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you another follow-up related to that, because I think this is a tricky thing for people who are engaged in great causes, but see fundraising as almost a necessary evil rather than as a wonderful opportunity to do something good. How important is it to engage prospective donors in the efforts? Because you brought Dick Scaife there. How important is that in your judgment?
That helps, because if they can see a site, and this is where you want to do a building, and this is why you want to do it, and then they teach them about the true importance of this great, great president, they get it. Wow. They understand it, and they can sort of visualize their name on something. That's very important. And I'm all for that. I think that people that give you a lot of money to do something noble deserve to have their name on it. And rarely does somebody say they don't want their name on it. They do.
Right.
And that's good.
You know, it's funny. I have found it's amazing to me that many times people's philanthropic gifts can sometimes become among the most important things they do in their life.
Absolutely.
And I don't think that's appreciated either.
I agree with you. I've actually said that to certain donors.
Wow.
I said, I know that you became president of this company or you started that wonderful this, but think about Mount Vernon. There's only one Mount Vernon. And people give to all sorts of things, but there is only one George Washington's home, and it needs to be spectacular. So they got it.
Well, last night I was with our mutual friends, Tom and Diane Smith.
They're wonderful.
They love you. They adore you, and they were telling me
them.
different things. And I didn't know about what you've done with 4 Arts here in Palm Beach, about bringing history teachers and professors. And tell us a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Well, I went to the president of the 4 Arts and the chairman and asked, this is several years ago, and asked if we could do a speaker series on the Founding Fathers. And they liked the idea. So I invited great historians to come and speak. And it was completely sold out, every single.
That's what I've heard. It's a waiting list now.
It was wonderful.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
So I think Americans love their American history. And even people that aren't steeped in it, a lot of women, older women here in Palm Beach, are going to these lectures and loving it. They are loving it.
Well, how appropriate. The first episode for 2026 of the Going Big podcast is with Gay Heart Gaines, and this is the year we celebrate the 250th birthday of the United States, the Declaration of Independence. Is that a big opportunity too?
Yes, that's a huge opportunity.
Wow.
I mean, it's an opportunity for you too.
Well, let me ask you, I want to bring some of these things to a close in terms of some insights and some particular ideas that you might share. But when you think about celebrating the 250th birthday or maybe the 300th birthday down the road,
I won't be here then. I'm going to celebrate the 250th.
You've amazed us with your continued leadership and energy for a long time. Energy, another key element of your amazing time, is for your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, what do you want them to see in America 50 years from now?
That's a great question. I want them to see the good. I've lived all over the world, as you know, and traveled all over the world. And every time I come home to America, I see really decent people and good people, all walks of life, all stratospheres of society, and they're really wonderful, wonderful people. And I've talked to them. And I mean, sometimes I'm fallen in love with the milkman because he's such a great guy. And, you know, we don't have that anymore. They don't deliver the milk like that, but I loved it. And I just think America's founding is important because it was founded differently than any other country. We didn't just come up through years of whatever. It was organized, a founding of a country. And it's spectacular. There's no other country like America.
You know, you're absolutely right.
No.
And the fact that the small place at the time, these extraordinary leaders stood forward, you know, from Patrick Henry to Thomas Jefferson to George Washington to James Madison and John Adams. We could go on and on. It's incredible.
It was a burst of brilliance. It's like a firecracker going off. And the people that were living here who became Americans, they got it. And it's hard to even imagine when you think about it. It wasn't always there, but it wasn't.
Yeah, and the fact that George Washington turned down the demands that he continue to be their new king.
Yeah.
And he had the presence of mind and the humility to say no. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Just
there were no
unbelievable.
kings.
No kings. Wow. All right. So, Kay, I want to begin to bring this to a close. For people listening, I think they're thinking, wow, this is really extraordinary. I mean, this person has done all these amazing things. I could never do anything like this.
Oh, yes, they can. This person was very lucky, lots of luck involved, just in who you meet in life. But also lucky that evidently my brain was never afraid to ask.
That's my first question. How did you have the courage to ask? How did you first, have that first conversation with Bill Buckley, who would be very intimidating? Or, I mean, good for you for having the vision to say we need Rush Limbaugh and Margaret Thatcher to lead this, but to engage, to be the first one down and the last one to leave. Any hints, advice, tips, suggestions?
I just think when you believe something strongly, do it. I wasn't intimidated. I should have been, perhaps, but I was very polite, but when I wanted somebody to help me, I asked. And I don't think you should not ask. I would tell any fundraiser or anybody who's a real patriot, when you want to go to somebody, ask that person. Don't be afraid. You have every right. That person could turn you down, but chances are he or she won't.
All right. Another thing that pops up a lot in these conversations is about the importance of mentors. You mentioned that teacher that inspired you about George Washington. Were there particular mentors in your life or influences, or was it just, you just lived this life?
Well, that one teacher was amazing. But after that, no, I would say my mother, who was a school teacher herself, my mother was a great influencer and sort of keeping me on the right track and never get a swollen head and just work. Daddy was a workaholic, and he said, you can do anything you want if you're willing to work hard enough. Most people aren't.
Yeah, no,
they say they
that's
want
true.
this,
Yeah.
this, and this, but they aren't willing to put in more than 8 hours a day. You might end up putting in 12 or 14 if you want to get a job done. And my father worked really hard, and so that I thought was appropriate.
Now, you've been a very big influence to a lot of other people. I've talked to many people who've been influenced by you.
Thank you.
Do you have any tips about how you can think about influencing others, or do you just live the kind of life that you've lived?
I'm not trying to influence people, Kevin. But if your life does, that's great. But I want to just tell you one thing. When I worked at GOPAC, we had 8 people working for us. When I arrived, there were 30. And I remember walking into the room and looking around this big, long table, and there were 30 young kids with pizzazz, and I assumed inspiration. They all wanted to work at GOPAC. And I said, we can't afford you. And I said, I'm the new chairman. I want you to look to the left and right because you won't be here in 1 week. So I want each of you to come and tell me why you think you can help me make this organization successful and how hard you're willing to work. And at the end of the week, that many are going to be gone. And so I did. I interviewed every one of them. One left immediately because she knew she didn't want to work that hard. But everybody else came, and I kept 8 people out of 30. And I told Newt, we just cut the payroll. And then I said, now we have to raise the money. And those kids were so fabulous. And I got to work every morning at 8, and I was always the last one to leave. And they got a message of somebody who was committed. And one time Stanley called me. He was picking me up the next day. We were going off for Christmas vacation. He said, where are you? I said, I'm still at GOPAC. And he said, Gay, it's 11:30. I said, I know, I'm not finished. And he was a little bit. And when I got to the elevator door opened, and every organization in the building had a Christmas party, and their great big garbage bags were in the elevator. And I couldn't get in. And so I'd press it in, the door would open. And so I just decided, okay, I have to climb over the garbage bags because the door on the other side was what was going to let me off in the garage. So finally I pressed against it, and then I turned around, and I had to get over the garbage bags in order to press the down button to the garage. And I lost a beautiful shoe that I never found again because it came off in the garbage bag.
Oh my gosh.
But I thought, That would be a great scene in a movie someday because nobody would believe it. It took me an hour to get out of the elevator, to get across the garbage bags and get the door open on the other side and get out.
But that's what it takes.
And Sandy, when I got home, said, "Where have you been?" I said, "In an elevator of garbage bags. You won't believe it," but it was the truth.
Wow. Well, you mentioned that you were looking for people that were contribution motivated.
Yes.
And this comes out a lot in these Going Big conversations too. Finding your gift, finding your contribution, and then how you can do that.
Yes.
Any comments on that?
Well, I think that everybody has great potential. And I also think when they see somebody who's willing to work a little longer and who really loves the mission. I loved Newt Gingrich and his mission. And I thought he was the smartest tiger in the jungle. And so I got the kids, they were all much younger than I, to love him. And then they didn't mind staying a little late. Or if we were working on a project that was going to help Newt Gingrich, they would stay with me. And they were wonderful. The 8 that I kept worked just as hard as I did. They were fabulous.
Wow.
They were really committed. And GOPAC helped Newt tremendously.
Well, there are a lot of great ideas and insights that we're getting from this conversation today. As we close it up, for anyone listening around the world, and I know we have an audience around the world, at any moment
Really?
they're listening to this, yes, this has been the #1 podcast on iTunes in the nonprofit category for
Really?
most of the last year. We have a vast audience, and this
you.
message will get out far and wide. Somebodies are listening, and they're looking for some kind of little cue, some kind of little encouragement, just to get them out of their comfort zone, I think, maybe to move them out of some complacency, to go do something and go big.
Well, you've just said it. You've said it. They're looking for something. They've just got to do it, not wait. If you want to make a casserole, go try it. Whatever you're trying to do it. Don't see other people doing it and wish you could. You can do it. You just have to work that hard and study and do it. And you also have to ask for advice. I used to ask Margaret Thatcher because I loved Margaret Thatcher, and Bill Buckley introduced me to her. And she arrived one time in Palm Beach when I knew her very well, and I didn't know she was coming. It was a Monday. And she said, "Gay dear, I'm here." I said, "Where?" She said, "Here in Palm Beach." And I said, "Oh, my goodness, would you like to come for dinner?" And I would invite a couple of friends. She said, "Are they of like mind?" And
God bless
she
her.
meant it. And you have to work with people of like mind very often, because then you're really committed to your goal. If everybody believes this is going to change America, or this is going to make this building happen, or whatever it is, are they of like mind? And she meant it.
All right. If there was one word of encouragement that you would offer, just one big, tough prompt to encourage people to do the kind of things, if people just did 5% of what you've done in your life, the world would be a much better place. But what word of encouragement would you offer to close us out, Gay?
Be fearless. Be fearless. Just tackle whatever it is, knowing you can make it better. And just do it. Don't have excuses why you can't. So many people won't even take the first challenge because they think, "Ooh, I might fail." Be fearless. You will fail sometimes, but that's okay.
Well, this is a great, as I said at the outset, a privilege and an honor to be with you.
It's a privilege for me. Thank you.
Well, I'm so glad that people are able to hear this conversation, and I hope they'll be inspired and encouraged to live the kind of life that you have. Keep at it. Let's do this again in 5 or 10 years.
Okay.
All right. Thank you,
You're
Gay.
on. 5. Might be safer.
Thanks for tuning in to the Going Big podcast. I hope today's conversation left you feeling energized and ready to tackle your biggest goals. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps spread the word, and it gets these inspiring stories out to more people. You can also find more content, resources, and updates at our website, goingbigpodcast.com. Remember, the only limits are the ones you don't challenge, the limits that you impose on yourself. Keep pushing, keep growing, and above all, keep going big. See you next time on the Going Big podcast.